try and find Zoom again. Right, here we go. That one there, please. Right, so welcome everybody to a December edition of our London Excel Meetup. And we've got Laura waiting to come in and talk us through some Power BI style visualizations, but doing them in Excel. So apparently Power BI is quite good at visualizations. And we're going to see how we can do similar things in Excel. Looking forward to that soon. Before that, just a few usual notes and upcoming event talk from myself. Firstly, that we are streaming live on YouTube at the moment, in addition to this Zoom session. And there is a link to the YouTube recording. So that stream is being recorded as it happens in the event description. So if anything you want to see back after the presentation today, the link is in that event page and still will be in that event page. And it'll also be sent in a follow-up email to anyone who's RSVP'd to the event. So if you're looking for that follow-up email where we'll share the recording and other things, depending what happens over this session that might get shared, anything relevant, then make sure that you've RSVP'd to the event on the page. On from there is just to let you know about some upcoming events. This is our last event of 2024, which probably doesn't come as too much of a surprise. But next year, we've got one booked in for January already. That's been booked in for a while with Summit, taking us through some regex in Excel, quite a new feature of Excel and something that probably a lot of people are lacking experience in, including myself. It's not like I need to do that very often. So it'd be interesting to see some examples from Summit on cleaning and extracting data using regex. Both the functions, and I'm expecting he'll probably show some examples using it in an XLOOKUP or something as well. But what do I know? I don't know what he's presenting on. I just know the topic. Then in February, there's a lot going on in February, more on that in a minute. But there's also a session with Craig going through his 5G methodology, his Lambda stuff. And that is an in-person only session. So that's on the 11th, Tuesday, the 11th of Feb, at the Microsoft Reactor, which is over in the Paddington area of London. And Craig will be there going through that. In-person events are always awesome, get to meet each other and have a good chat as well as that kind of learning experience. And then nothing official on the Meetup page yet. I do need to get around to putting it on there. But we will be in Milan in kind of mid-May. We do have a venue booked for the 19th of May, Monday the 19th. So that will be happening, just lacking details on what exactly we're going to do that day yet. So I've got myself down as a presenter. More details will follow on that. But it is confirmed. So if you're interested in heading to Milan to meet us there, or if you happen to live around the area and it's easy for you to get there rather than London, it's always an opportunity when we kind of move around to as an opportunity to meet up if you can. So we will definitely be there if you want to start making plans. Details to follow though. Now, if you haven't got your ticket yet, I'm under the impression that there is not a lot left. And early bird tickets are still available for the Global Excel Summit in London and also streamed online. We do have online tickets too. And that is going from the 4th to the 6th of Feb, 2 days in person, 1 day strictly online. And as part of this group, we have our own discount code LEM, London Excel Meetup, LEM15, which gives you an even further discount. And there are not many tickets left. So if it takes your fancy, heading to London and being amongst a load of Excel geeks, learning and talking Excel and taking photos of each other and drinking and eating and doing things on laptops, that is the place to be. And it's 2 jam-packed days, let alone the other stuff we do on that. So loads of presentations, loads of networking opportunity. CPD hours up for grabs if that interests you. And you'll also have all the recordings and stuff as well. But as far as in-person conferences go, and in terms of Excel, it is one of, if not the best around. And tickets are short, so if it takes your fancy, I would move fast so that you don't get disappointed. And don't forget to use your LEM15 code for nearly half price, 30 plus 15. And Carlos is going on about Inter in the chat. What is going on? Cool. I think that's probably it from me. Is that me? That is me. So if I stop my share and if I can pass over to Laura to, I guess, introduce herself and then even more exciting, go through some Power BI style visualizations in Excel.
Yes, thank you. And hi to everyone. I'm so happy that you're joining us today. Just a quick introduction on myself before we start our Excel. My name is Lara, and I started my Excel journey a couple of years ago when I started my first job. And actually, my Excel knowledge was right just at zero. I didn't know anything, just more or less how to build a sum. And at my first workplace, we didn't even use a lot of Excel. So there was a lot of Word and Outlook. But then I realized we're just putting data from one program into the other one. So I told myself there has to be a better way to do it. And that's actually how I just started my journey, because I started to automate processes. I did a few courses on VB and everything, and I was just blown away by this whole new world of Excel. And I realized I have so much fun on building these Excel tools that I actually left my day job behind me and I completely transitioned into data. So I have been a data analyst, a data scientist, but I would describe myself best as an IT consultant with Excel, or I'm also teaching Excel. So consultant and trainer. Yeah, more or less, that's my small Excel journey. Yeah, and I'm really thrilled to be here today with you. I'm going to quickly say a few words about the workbooks, and then I'm going to start with my presentation. So we have, I think, 4 or 5 workbooks. You can download them under the link, and whatever works for you best. So you can either just watch what I'm doing within Excel, or you can also follow the examples and try to understand the functions. Important note is, if you have any questions, just don't hesitate, write them in the chat, and either I'm getting back in the end of our session today to your questions or just in between. Yeah, so with that, our session today, bringing Power BI style visualizations into Excel. What does that actually mean? Because whenever we talk about great dashboards, a lot of people instantly think about Power BI or Tableau. You know, when you say good dashboard, people don't usually think about Excel. And that's what I'm trying to change a little bit, because I don't think that great dashboards can only happen through those programs. I think those are just blank canvases, and however you use those programs will determine how good your dashboards are. It doesn't matter which kind of programs you use. The only thing that matters is actually your skill set. So that's why I'm trying to change our industry to show that Excel is a great tool. You can create just the same or maybe even better dashboards than in Power BI. And we are going to focus on 2 things today, because when you think of Power BI, I think in the end of the day, there are 2 great things about it. First of all, it's the interactivity, and that's something that I really adore about Power BI. You can just click on through some points on a data chart and the whole dashboard will be filtered. That's really something nice that we don't have in Excel. I mean, you can do the same thing with VBA, but currently you have to use some workarounds. So I'm going to show you a few examples on how to make your dashboard more interactive. And the second thing is the design. A lot of people, when they think about Excel, they think, Excel is so old school, maybe even ugly. You don't describe the dashboards as beautiful, nice looking, or modern. That's more something that people say about Power BI. But again, it's all about the skill set. If you just spend a little bit more time on your dashboard, you can actually transform the whole thing and format it so that it looks great. And I will give you some very cool resources and tips and tricks around that topic as well. So our agenda is, first, I'm going to do a quick introduction, a few of the design tips and tricks, some resources. How can I decide what colors fits together? What do I do with the layout? Then we're going to jump into the examples. So how can I make the charts more interactive? What kind of tips and tricks can I do such that I can tell a story with my charts? And then my favorite part is actually in the end, how can I bring those visualizations into Excel that are only in Power BI? Which is the navigation. How can I navigate through pages? The dark mode. How can I switch quickly between dark mode and light mode in Excel? And the KPI cards. Because in Power BI, it's really easy to just drag and drop a KPI card into our dashboards, but there are also some tips and tricks how we can create a really good looking KPI card in Excel. And with that said, I think we can just directly start. I didn't do any PowerPoint slides, so we're going to jump right into Excel with our first workbook. I'm going to share my screen in a minute. So.
Awesome. It's all working, Laura.
Okay, it worked. Perfect. So I opened our first workbook. Oh yeah, and before I forget, it's actually great that I have it on my screen now. I have a newsletter with Excel templates, tricks, and updates. So if you're interested in it, you can just click on the button and then sign up for my newsletter. And I'm also very happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. So if you have any questions after the session, just drop me a message on LinkedIn and I'm happy to give you other examples or show you some solutions. And I will be also in London in February attending the Global Excel Summit. So make sure that you say hi if you're also there. Okay. Before we start, when Alan asked me about the date of today's sessions, I've seen that the 5th of December is still available, and I just knew that I had to take this date because of a particular reason. Now, I'm originally from Hungary, and we have a really funny tradition there, because on the 5th of December in the evening, the children receive some presents. Actually, it's more on the 6th, on the morning of the 6th when they wake up, but the presents are already there on the 5th of December. Now, depending on if the children were nice or naughty this year, either there are just two options who brings the presents on this day for them. So if you select the drop down here, you actually see we have the two options, Nicholas, or maybe the presents are actually from the Krampus. So if the children were not so good at that here, they receive the gifts from Krampus, and in worst case, they can even get kidnapped from the Krampus. Well, why did I actually select this example? First of all, I do think it's a funny tradition, especially when you don't know it. For foreigners, it could be a little bit weird. Secondly, I think it's also a great example to show you because I did this with charts. I connected the drop down with a chart to show you you can really easily put some interactivity and a little bit fun into your Excel sheet. Now I'm going to show you later how I did that. But first of all, we're going to start a little bit of theory around dashboard creation. So how can we describe a good dashboard? What are the keywords which I can describe my dashboard with? You see, I have two pictures on my screen now, before and then after transformation dashboard. And that's actually my goal for you today, such that you can make a better dashboard than probably yesterday. When we talk about good dashboards, it might be hard to decide what are the points that I have to focus on. But it's important to think about that you're not creating your dashboard for yourself, but for the users. So you have to think about it, okay, do my users also know the data as well as I do? Because in most cases, there's a huge difference between you and your audience, right? You're kind of like the data guy, you're the developer behind the dashboard, but you have to make sure that the people who actually will use the dashboard, they also think that your dashboard is great. So you have to make sure that the dashboard is user-friendly, it's interactive, it's responsive, it's understandable, intuitive, so that everyone can really easily understand it. And I think most of the work happens even before you start the dashboard. So you can save so much time if you have a clear plan of what you're going to focus on before you start with the creation of the dashboard. There are some key questions that you have to consider before you start. For example, who is the end user? Do they know the data as well as I do? What is the purpose of the dashboard? Are we trying to identify patterns, or are we tracking some KPIs and some performances? Also, one really big thing to consider is how is the data getting in Excel? Because we don't want to do manually anything, you know. The more we automate Excel, the easier our life will be. And that's why I would really suggest you to take a look at some automation options. For example, with all my dashboards, I use Power Query to extract data from another source, such that the user only will have to click on one button, and then the new data will get in, and all the pivot tables and the dashboard in the end will get refreshed just so quickly. Once you're done with the questions, you can actually start to plan your dashboard. And another suggestion for me is to spend a lot of time with getting to know the data, because if you start just drawing up the charts and the dashboards right away after you receive the data, it might not be the best solution. You have to really understand what's going on with your data. What kind of columns do you have? Do you have dates? Do you have times? Or what is the best slicer for this data? So make sure that you spend most of your time with just browsing the data and just have a feeling, how is the structure of the data? What kind of columns do you have there? Now, I'm not going to go through all the points, but just for your information, on the right side, you also have some resources. So these are the people that I personally follow on LinkedIn, and they all posted really great Power BI content. So if you want to get inspired, make sure that you give them a follow too. Now, the two last points are the colors and the inspiration, and those are actually our next topics. How can I make sure that I choose the right colors, and how can I make this whole process of dashboard creation easier and more efficient? Because when I started creating dashboards, I had spent hours and hours, and still I wasn't happy with the result. And I started building up my collection. So whenever I saw something that I really liked, even if it's just a chart or a KPI or some colors here or there, I just saved it in my own collection. And now I have actually offline a folder with all of my inspiration. So whenever I'm creating a dashboard, I just open up my collection and see, okay, this is the colors that I like. These are the layouts that I like. These are the KPIs. And I mix them together, and I can create a whole new dashboard, which looks great. And this whole process just gets a lot easier when you have your own collection. So I think that's really a game changer tip if you're creating dashboard. Just to see what you like, save it in your own collection, and just consider it. What is it, that particular thing that I like about this dashboard? Colors, layout, KPI, whatsoever. On the right side, I collected some of the coolest resources and I use them all the time. They are really great because I think most of us are not, I'm not a graphic designer, so I don't have that intuition of which colors fit well together. But for that, I don't even need to spend much time on it because we have all these resources available. The first one is an AI color palette tester, which is one of the best things when it comes to dashboards. I just opened the link and you can see there is a sample dashboard here. Now I can either test out existing color combinations, or I could theoretically also put in my own colors and to see what would be the result. How would the dashboard look like with my own colors? Maybe just I'm going to highlight one more resource, which is the Pinterest inspiration by Mara Pereira. I have my own offline, but she collected a lot of great looking dashboards on Pinterest. And if you take a look at it, it's such a great resource because you have all of these ideas on one place. I think it can really accelerate your whole process when you use this transformation board. If you have the time, take a look at the other resources. They are all really helpful and great things. Now, chances are when you have to create one dashboard, that you also have to create more dashboards in the future. So I would really suggest you to try to create one template, or actually you can even download one, and then just reuse that template again and again. As for the layout, I have included a few of the examples here. And you can see that there is like a best practice or a pattern amongst these dashboards. Usually the KPI cards are on the top of the dashboards, a little bit over the charts, because these are the informations that are a little bit outlined, they're a little bit bigger, easier to read, because this is the most important things on the dashboard. So if I have only a short time, then I really want to understand these numbers very quickly. Then I have the charts in the middle, and on the left side, depending on, either you can have a navigation or your sliders to filter the whole dashboard. And when you look at the other dashboards, you will see this pattern amongst a lot of others. So I would suggest you, if you're really new to dashboards, to just go with this layout: navigation on the left side, KPI cards on the top, and then the charts in the middle. Now, as for the whole dashboard process, if you're very new at this, I would also suggest for you to just sketch it out. What is it that you want to include on your dashboards? How do you want to have the layout? Which charts do you want to use? Because most of the times, it's better to speak to the user first, to show them only the sketch, to make sure that they are also on board. And then afterwards, you can start in Excel. With that, you can really save so much time, because I had the case that I was actually done with the dashboard and I talked to the user and they just told me they just want a pivot table or even a simple Excel table. They don't want that. So you can actually save some time and some nerves if you do the sketch and talk to your users in the beginning. Yes, and as for the next part, I have here 10 points. I'm not going to go through all of the points because I do want to show you all of the examples in Excel, but you can actually use these points as a more or less a checklist to make sure that your dashboard is actually a good one. So for example, if you ask your questions, did I use a consistent color palette? Did I add icons or visual indicators to my dashboard? If you answer most of these questions with yes, then it means that you're actually in a good way and your dashboard is going to be great. Now on the fifth worksheet, you can see two similar KPI cards. The only difference lies actually in the design. On the left side, I didn't spend a lot of time to design this KPI. On the right side, I did use a little bit more of my time. But you see, the difference is just huge. And the devil lies in the smallest details, because these small details can make or break the whole design. So whenever we talk about Power BI designs, I think a lot of them have these modern designs, which means that you can actually use a lot of shadows, a lot of gradients, you know, red or green colors to make sure that the whole dashboard has this modern aesthetics. And you can see the small differences I made here. I added some visual cues so that it's highlighted that we're talking about revenues. That's why I added this money icon and also the euro currency. Then if you use black or green colors, I think it's also a great way if you use red and green colors to highlight if the change is positive or negative, because we want to instantly see the change, and colors can always help with that. I added some shadows to highlight some parts of this KPI, and then the result is very different from these basic KPI cards. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about KPI cards and how you can create them in Excel, but this is just an example to keep in mind that great design actually makes a huge difference in the dashboards. And as for the finishing touches, if you really want to give your Excel this Power BI look, then you can use a few of these points. You can hide the grind lines, some columns, or even like hide the menu bar. And I'm going to show you these exact steps at the end of our session. But I think we can already jump into the Excel examples. So we're done with the first part. We're done with the designing. I'm going to jump into chapter 2 examples. First of all, I'm going to show you how to create a basic interactive Excel dashboard. What are the technicalities behind it? On our worksheet sample pivots, I have created some pivot tables from our data set, which is a normal data table in Excel. I have these 4 pivot tables, and to each of the pivot tables, I created some basic pivot charts also for. And then if you scroll a little bit down, you can see I created this mini pivot tables, which only consists of one simple row. That means I really calculated only one thing. In our example is the sum of gift deliveries. So in our examples from now on, we're going to take a look at Santa's business with some reindeers, and we want to measure how is the health of our reindeers. How many carrots do they eat per year? How many hours per day do they sleep? And how many gifts did they deliver? That's our main thing here. If you click on the sample dashboard, you see reindeer's dashboard. I have the same layout that I showed before. That means the KPI cards are on the top. On the left side, I have some slicers, and here I have my charts. Now, the main idea of an interactive dashboard is that if I click on a slicer, then the whole dashboard will be filtered, ideally, so that I really only see the data from the filter section. And now 2 things that you have to consider with this step. First of all, when I created all of the pivot tables, that's a small tip, but just as with data tables and with other things in Excel, you can rename these pivot tables. So this one example, the name is RD minus carrots. RD stands for reindeer. And all of the pivot tables have very similar names so that it will be then easier for me later to see which pivot table consists of which data. After I created the pivot charts and these mini pivot tables, I just copy pasted them to this new dashboard sheet. And the only thing that I have to take into consideration is the following. If I were to create a new slicer, it will be only connected to one particular pivot chart. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people maybe don't use that often. But if you create a new slicer, it will be only connected to this one chart. So make sure that you go to the slicer section, report connection, and you tick all the pivot tables that you want to show on your dashboard, because that's the only way how you can connect one slicer to all of the pivot charts here. That's a really important point. And the second is the KPI cards. I'm going to talk later more in detail about the KPI cards, how you can create it. But for now, the only important point 49, I actually just inserted a text box. And then you can go to the formula bar and connect this text box to a single cell. And when I go back to the original worksheet with all the pivot tables, I can here select one cell, which already has the information that I need. We needed the sleeping hours, exactly. And when I click on enter, this text box now includes exactly that information about the sleeping hours. And the good thing is, when I connect this pivot table with my slicer, then it will be all filtered when I use my slicers on this page. So this is how you can actually bring everything on the same page and connect it to each other. Use slicers and pivot tables. The rest is really just formatting your dashboard. That would be the basics of a simple dashboard. Now, since we have dynamic arrays functions now, we don't have to use pivot tables, but I think if you're new with dashboard, this is a great point to start. As for the second part, where I'm going to show you now some examples on how to make charts even more descriptive, more interactive, how to highlight, for example, the maximum, or how to combine more charts with each other. And then in the last part, I'm going to show you how to create those KPI cards that I'm showing you before. In our first example, I used a drop-down, and based on the selection here, if you select another reindeer, you will see the data from this particular reindeer. So we want to track the meals of our reindeers, and we want to see how much they eat, how much carrots do they eat per day. I selected Rudolph, and as you see, Rudolph eats most of his carrots at his dinner, and that's why this particular column chart is now red. If I were to select another one, for example, Cupid, you see that the second Cupid eats actually the most carrots at his second breakfast. How can we create something like this? And I think this is a very simple example, but it's important to understand it for the other examples as well. In the background, I actually have two charts on top of each other. I have these gray charts, which is chart 1, with all of the meals from breakfast until dinner. And I have a second one, which is formatted red, which only highlights the maximum value of Cupid's data set. And these charts are laying on top of each other, and that's why we have the result here. So I have to make sure that I have the selection here. That means that based on this dropdown, based on this cell value, I just use the XLOOKUP to find the data from Rudolph in from this data set. That's our first step. Then the second step was I had to find the maximum value of this data set, which was 35 in our case. And then for the second chart, for this red chart, I used a helper row. And I think this is a great trick if you're working with charts, because actually I only want to show this one column. So what I did was I said, okay, if the number here is at the maximum, is not the maximum, sorry, then I want to produce an error, an NA error. If it's the maximum, just as with the dinner, then I do want to see the actual number there. Because the good things is, now if I create the chart from this data set, the error is just not shown. There is like no column there, no column chart there, but the maximum with the number 35 will be shown. And that's a great way, this is a great way to create a dynamic chart and to conditionally format it. The last step is when you calculated these numbers, it's a small trick, but you can actually highlight this data set, copy it, click on the chart one, paste it, and you can already see it's not formatted with red, but with pink. But I just copy pasted my data into the chart one. And if I were to select another reindeer, then I see, okay, truly, now the data has changed and now the second column chart is highlighted with a different color. And that's exactly the same thing that I did here on the right side with the carrot consumption. The only thing is that I used here carrots instead of the column charts. So there are many ways to build more interactivity in your charts. Now we have a lot of similar examples. So I'm going to just show you a few things, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate, just write it in the chat and I can gladly explain it into more details. But I have so many examples that I really want to make it a little bit more quick. So we have a very similar example just with line charts, and you can actually see that there are two lines, they are on top of each other. The gray one is actually in the background, the red one is above it. And based on what I select here with the dates, I created a helper line, which will either result in an error, the NA error, or the number if the dates are actually in this time interval. So that's really similar to our first example. Now, a little bit different is the next one because I combined a lot of line charts. Now, before that, I showed you the example with the pivot tables. In this case, I actually used a slicer with, with a table. Now, how can I connect the slicer to the table and to make sure that the red line, now it's working without the pivot table? I use the subtotal function. I think there are only two functions that could work in this case. But basically what I told Excel is, please bring me the result only for the visible cells. So the other reindeers that are now filtered out, we don't use the data from that. I can only see the ID from Blitzen because he's the reindeer that is selected here. And if I have the results in a cell, I can use either the indirect function or the XLOOKUP to, again, create a helper column and to layer this red line above the gray ones. And I think this is a great way if you want to tell a story, because I can just click on the slicer and I not only see that the line is highlighted, but also that the data label tells me which reindeer is the one that is highlighted right now. And when it comes to data storytelling, it might be also useful to leave some comments within your charts. So in this example, if you click on the checkbox, you see that either the text disappear or they appear. So based on if you want to tell a story, you can also use the checkboxes. I have some helper columns in this case. We have the comment column where the texts are saved in. And then I just inserted a few columns which will take into consideration if your checkbox is activated or deactivated. And based on the checkbox, the comments will appear or will disappear in that case. So as you can see, I think the legend is pretty helpful, and that's why I didn't delete it. You can see we have two series of charts on top of each other. I have the blue line, and on top of it, there is actually a second one, which has only these 2 points. Once when the magic carrot was discarded, and once when Frosty had an injury. I think this is a great way for data storytelling to bring a little bit more interactivity into your charts. And I know a lot of people don't like pie charts, and I get it, but I still want to include 1 or 2 pie chart example. So what is the problem with pie charts? Usually we have too many categories, and then it's hard to see, okay, which is the third best or which is the second best. But if we're telling a story, some people just really want to have a pie chart. Like you just can't discuss it. They want to have the pie chart. Fine, let's do that. But with this drop-down solution, the great thing is if you select another category, then those category will have another color. So if you want to tell a story and you're talking about, okay, Frosty had an injury, let's see how many apples does he have to eat per day, or how many carrots to be healthy again. I think this is a great solution to build some interactivity right into your charts. Now the solution is very similar to the one that we've seen before. I have actually 2 pie charts on top of each other. The one below is just gray with all the slices, and the second one has actually 3 slices. You can see it here. I did use some functions to calculate it, but it actually has, I selected the leafy greens now. It actually has 3 slices, the second pie chart on top of the other one. The first one is the first slice, the second one, this is the blue, and the third one is actually everything that comes right after the second one. So when you calculate these 3 things, now it's easy to create the second pie chart on top of the first one. Whenever you're trying to make an interactive solutions, just try to see the chart in pieces. Okay, I have to do one part with only the gray slices. That will be my pie chart number 1. And then I want to create a new one. Which are the parts that I need to use here? I think it always helps if you try to make it step by step and very easily. Now, let's jump to the next example. Slicer to highlight. I think this is one of my favorite examples because there's one problem that I find with our dashboard. And I'm going to jump back a little bit. The problem is if I create here a slicer with the reindeers and I select one, then I will only see one of the first charts if this slicer, oh, sorry. So yes, that always happens. I actually forgot to connect it. Let me just quickly do it. Right. Yes, so I created a slicer here, which is connected to the reindeers. And whenever I select one reindeer, all of the others disappear, sadly. So it could be hard for me to compare the data on the similar reindeers. And I think this solution is exactly good for the problem, because here, when I select another reindeer, the others don't disappear. This one just gets highlighted. And this is a very simple solution. I did it with dynamic arrays. So we have the normal data set here with all of the reindeers. Again, the gray colors in the background. And then the second one, it's either 0 if we don't want to show that data set, or if it's the number if I select exactly that reindeer from the slicer. If I select Blitzen, for example, I see the number 7 right next to it. All of the other reindeers have a 0. And that is for the second chart, which is on top of the gray chart. So this is actually the blue chart here. And I connected the slicer to this data table. And again, I use the help column with the subtotal function, which is only for visible cells. So this is a really great solution to connect slicers to data and then again to charts. If you want to take this to a whole new level, one of my favorite features in Excel is the picture in cell. Because based on the selection, I can also, like what I did in this table, I just put some pictures next to the data. And then I used XLOOKUP to look for the picture, which is then saved in this last column. Let me just quickly delete this so you can see. So actually, there are 5 pictures saved in this table. And based on which reindeer I select, I will also see the picture next to it. I think this is a great way if you use slicers, because it gives you so much information and it looks just so great. I think this is picture in cell is really a fun feature in Excel. So the steps are, I put the pictures in the cell. Then I use the XLOOKUP to find only one picture that is connected to the slicer. And then you can click on this cell, click on picture in cell and create a reference. And then actually you will have a picture which is connected to your slicer. It's a really great, I think this is a really great and fun way to show data. Now I'm taking a look at the time and I think we can jump to the next part, which is the KPI. So actually, these are one of my favorite examples, because when we talk about Power BI, a lot of people instantly think we have the easy KPI cards and navigation, and that's so hard to do in Excel. But actually, on the contrary, these are the simplest thing. And KPIs are a great way to show you the most important part of your data and to really elevate your dashboard. If we take a look at this worksheet, I included a few of examples how you can format your KPI. I mean, there are thousands of examples online, especially on LinkedIn, going around. So if you have some time, take a look around, decide which one you like. The good thing is everything that you see here is actually possible in Excel. So these were done with Tableau, these with Power BI, but it actually doesn't really matter. We can do the same things in Excel with a little bit of workaround for sure, but everything is possible. Now, the basics of a KPI. How can I create a very basic KPI? One card is just a group of several objects grouped together. So for example, with this slicer, when I click on another one, I can see, okay, the name is changing from the name of the reindeer is changing, the numbers are changing, and also the text here, if it's green or red, it should be also changing. So it's a really dynamic way to show some data. Now, what I did here is actually pretty simple because I just inserted the background like a very simple rectangle with rounded corners. Then I inserted some text box. And the great thing is about text box is if you insert one, you can go to the formula bar, insert, and link it directly to a cell, just as I've shown you before. This means that if I select another one, you can already see it. Let me just make it a little bit bigger. In just 2 really quick steps, I was able to replicate a part of this KPI. Now, if you do, I can do the same with the name of the reindeer. The rest is just normal text box, a picture with a carrot. Yes, and more or less, that's a KPI. The rest is really just basic formatting. One thing that I did it with the green and the red text, because I think it's very, very useful, is I actually created this in Canva. I created 2 signs, used the picture in cell function again. So I put these pictures into the cell, and then I used the if function to see if the change from last year is positive or negative. If it was positive, I want to put the green sign into this cell. If it was negative, I want to put the red sign in this cell. And then as the last step, I can create a reference to this picture. And then I can just push this into my KPI card, link all this together, and then I'm actually done. For the second part in this red text, I conditionally formatted the cell, and I used the camera tool to actually take a screenshot from this cell, then put this screenshot on top of the KPI. The only thing that you need to be aware of is that it's standard that there is like a white background, and also, let me make it a little bit bigger so that you can see. So it has a white background and also some line, but you can actually just change it with a few formatting settings. And now you have a really dynamic solution to show others the data which is in the cell. And if you group these things, these text boxes, this picture in a cell together, you have your first KPI card. The technicalities, it's not that complex, just a few steps and you're actually done. So a few more KPI tricks, because I think KPI is one topic that where we have really, really amazing possibilities. And before I forget, I've shown you, I'm using Microsoft 365. But if you have an older Excel version and something is not working, please just let me know, write me a text on LinkedIn or so, because there are many great workarounds. So we can actually use this picture in cell also with older Excel versions. There might be a workaround that we need, but there usually is really good solutions. So in our first KPI here, the only difference that I have is that the rectangle looks a little bit different. And now this is one-to-one the same as in Power BI. I think Power BI is kind of famous of these KPI changes because the rectangle is usually also with a rounded corner. Now there are 2 ways to do this. I think the easiest, and also what I did in many examples, is if you just download a picture which looks exactly like the background, like this red background, and then you just copy it and put this picture into the cell. And then just as we did it with the other examples with the positive negative sign, You can also use it here as the red background or the green. It's basically the same. If you have an older Excel version, you might need some work around this. Now, in the second example for the KPIs, we have the totals hour. How many hours did our reindeers sleep last year or actually this year? So you see the only difference is that our delta is a little bit more white, but also depending on which reindeer I select, the text is either red or green. And also this small line is also either red or green. And that's actually one of the KPIs that I often see within Power BI. Now, first of all, I created a cell and I conditionally formatted it. So if the change is bigger than 0, it should be green. Otherwise, it should be red. And then I used again the camera tool to create a screenshot, a dynamic screenshot more or less. And I put it on top of the KPI card. The second part, this line, is actually just a chart. So I have some helper cells here, and I created some functions. And with that help, I can see, okay, if the change is negative, then I want this red to be 100 and all of the 2 other categories to be 0. If the change is positive, now I'm not sure which reindeer has a positive change, but I think Rudolph is the one. If the change is positive, then I want here, the value to be here 100, all of the others 0, and gray should be if the change is exactly 0. And if we combine, if we create a simple chart from all of this, I just created a simple bar chart, then I can easily format the data bar so that it's green, or for the green part, it should be green, for the red part, it should be red, and for the gray, it should be gray. And based on these values, the chart will always have the right color. So this is just another example for the same KPI. Now, the third KPI is also very different. It's just differently formatted. So whenever you see a KPI and you think, how can I do this in Excel? Just try to take a look at the small pieces that are in the KPI. So in this part, I actually have the background, which is just a rectangle, just an object that you can create in Excel. Then I have one text box, another text box, which is linked to the cell. Then here again, I have a text box, which is linked to this cell. Here I have a picture in cell, which is based on, again, the change, if it's positive, negative, or 0. And here on the right side, this is just a line chart, which is a small line chart. And if you combine these elements together, if you group them together well, you can create easily a nice looking KPI card. It's really not that difficult. Now, I have some other KPI examples if you want to take it to the next level even. Let me start with the last one, because I actually, like I mentioned that we are not going to use any VBA here. I did use the combo box, however, just to show you what our options are. So if I select here carrots, then since the change for the carrots is actually positive, the background is green. If I select another category like sleep, then the background will be red. So it's a really fast way for me to see if the change has been either positive or negative. And actually I used again the picture in cell. So here I just calculated, I have a positive background, a negative background, And then with the if function, I just checked, okay, is our change from last year positive? Then I want to have the green background. If it's negative, I want to have the red one. I created, again, a reference, and then I just put it really into the background. Now we can use actually this combo box and connect it to a cell. And based on this cell, I can just track the data with the XLOOKUP function, just as I've shown before. The problem is I don't really like this combo box because you cannot really design it. You cannot really change how it looks. So there are other options to have a workaround to make it look a little bit better. Now let me just scroll up a little bit. Yeah, so I created here a more or less dark mode KPI. I actually took the data again. I used the picture in cell just as in the previous examples to create these red and green arrows. And the good thing is, if you click on the last month, you will see this drop-down will appear, and I can select another options, for example, last 6 months or last year. And all of the data on the KPI will dynamically change. Now, this is very similar to the last KPI that I've shown you. The difference is really just the design. This is really an old school Excel design, which hasn't been updated. Unfortunately, we also don't have any possibilities to really change the design of this. So I thought there must be another way. Now, this is a little bit of a workaround, but if you were actually, for example, to move this KPI, you see that the background is actually cut out. So we have a cell with the drop down, which is connected then to the other data source. And I created in PowerPoint a KPI card background, which is cut out on one place. So now I know this is a little bit of a workaround, but I do think this option looks much, much better than the first one, much less like Excel and more like Power BI. The good thing is that this cutting out is very easy in PowerPoint. I created the rectangle. I can, if someone is interested, I can show you the steps later. I created a rectangle, then I created also this part, and it's just really one click to cut it out and then import it to Excel. And the last KPI example is more or less the same. So if I click on the sleep here, I see that the drop-down arrow will appear. I can, again, select another category, and all of the data which I already prepared on the right side will be changed based on my drop-down selection. And I used, again, the same trick, which means this white background is actually cut out at one place, so that I can click directly on the cell. And I think this might be a little bit of a workaround, but this is a great tip or trick if you have some data in the cells that you want to show in your dashboard, because sometimes you just want to have a nice looking background, you know, but the problem is the moment you put that background, that object on top of the cells, everything else that is just in the cells will disappear and you won't be able to see it. But if you physically, more or less, cut out a part of this rectangle, you will be able to see also the parts that are directly in the cell. And I actually created a similar dashboard. I will show it to you later, maybe, with if you use heat maps or an Excel table. This is also a great workaround to show charts, cells, and a nice background at the same page. Yes, so let me see. I think we are done with the KPI section. And I think I hope we have some more time, because I want to show you 2 or maybe 3 more things. Other great things in Power BI that we don't have in Excel are the navigation panel, so that I want to click on something, on a little bookmarks, and I want to just be able to go to another page, and then the dark mode or light mode in Excel. And those are actually one of my favorite things. So I'm going to switch to the next chapter, which is the navigation, to show you how it looks like in the background. So here we have the data. And again, we have our reindeers. We want to track the hours that they sleep, the carrots that they eat, and the gifts that they deliver. Now, I have this more or less little card or widget. And if on the left side, we have the navigation. If I click on the hours, oh, sorry, I had to resize, forgot to resize the sheet. Now it should work. So if I click on the carrots, I will see other data. If I click on the navigation panel, then I will see different data. And the reason is, how does this whole thing actually work in the background? So there you have 2 options. Either you can store your data on the same worksheet that you have your navigation, or what I would suggest is a little bit better. You create a new worksheet with your data. You say, okay, these are the hours slept. This will be my worksheet 1, then carrots for worksheet 2, and then gifts for worksheet 3. And I have the data here. Because then actually we don't even need those columns. I can just hide it. Now, I created the first page here on the first worksheet and then just copy pasted it and changed some data. So this means I did change a little bit the formatting of the buttons here on the left side and also all of the data. And we can also hide this data here. And I did the same thing with the third workbook. Those are the gifts. And if you hide this, all this data, and actually you can even hide the summary sheet, you can use this navigation panel to jump from one page to another. Now, I created this more or less KPI such that we have 1 worksheet per KPI, let's say. 1 for the hours, 1 for the carrots, and 1 for the gifts. Which looks and actually is functioning really well. How did I do this whole navigation panel? Let me just quickly open this up. If you click on these buttons with, for example, your right mouse click, you can select here the link option. And when you go to the link option, you can just actually select one place in your Excel sheet. So this means if I were to create a new rectangle, let's take it for example, I can say, okay, if I click on this button, then please redirect me to another worksheet. And the next time someone clicks on this button, this will actually work really well. And you don't need any VBA for this. So it's a very simple step, but very efficient. Now, the only thing is, the problem more or less, that you still see the worksheets here, right? I mean, it's great that the navigation works, but I can see what's behind. So I'm going to show you another example, and then I'm going to show you how you can actually just let the worksheets more or less here disappear. Because the problem is I could hide the worksheets, but then the links won't work anymore. So I've hidden the worksheet gifts, and now when I want to click on it, it just doesn't work. So it's not that simple, but there is an actual solution to this problem. But before that, let me show you another example, which is more or less the same. The navigation 2. I also created here 3 workbooks with 3 of our most important things about our reindeers, which is the sleep, the carrot consumption, and then the gifts. The only thing different is I formatted the navigation panel very differently from my previous example. We have these arrows here, and if I click on the right arrow, it will jump to the middle worksheet. If I click on the right arrow again, it will jump to the last sheet. And you can try it out. Actually, it also works with the rectangles. So if I click on the middle one, I will see the carrots because that's the sheet in the middle. If I click on the left rectangle, then I will jump directly to the first worksheet. Now, the good thing is this is, again, just a matter of formatting. Nothing has been done with VBA so far. What I did is I inserted some arrows and some rectangles. I made sure that it's clear on which page we are. So it's always the white one. In our case, it's now the first one. All of the other ones are a little bit more transparent. And I just used the same function that before, the same feature. That is with my right mouse click, I clicked on this object. I selected the link option, and then here I can say self-reference to another worksheet. Very easy, yet very highly effective when it comes to visualizations. Now, I mentioned it in the beginning, a few tips or tricks, but I didn't go into much details on how to make this Excel look less like Excel. What are the tips and tricks that we can do such that this dashboard looks better? In case you don't want to export your dashboard into PowerPoint, or you don't want to send it through an email, so you really want to show it in Excel, there are a few things that you can do. The first is you can actually get rid of the grid lines. You won't see it here because I have a gray background, but I think within the other example, yes. So first of all, under the view, I can just deselect the grid lines, and then I got rid of them. Then the second one is I can do the same with the formula bar and also the headings. So now it looks really more like a dashboard. If I click double on a menu, then also this whole thing will disappear. And the last piece is I want to get rid of the worksheets, like not to delete them, but some kind of, I want to hide them. Now, I've shown you before, if we really hide the worksheets, the problem is that the links won't work anymore. So we have to have another solution. And if you go to the options, to advanced, and then you need to scroll a little bit down, you will actually have, I always struggle to see the right option here, but you have to have a display. Oh, there it is. Display options for this workbook. And you have this small option, show sheet tabs. Because if you deselect this one, and then you click on OK, all of the worksheets will disappear. Really important is, first of all, you have to make sure that you have a navigation. That means you have some buttons that you can click on to be able to navigate to the other ones, because otherwise you're stuck on the same page. But if you get rid of this option, then now our dashboard really looks professional. I really completely can forget that I'm in Excel. It has such a cool user experience, and it's just the small details that you need to change. And my last example, I hope we still have time for that. It's going to be a short one. My last example is really similar to this one. It's the dark mode. because a few months ago, my whole LinkedIn just blew up because everyone was just so happy to have received dark mode in Power BI, but actually there is a way to replicate it in Excel. So I created a dark dashboard here with my top 3 favorite reindeers, and just inserted some data about these reindeers. On the left side, again, I have the navigation with only 2 buttons now, light and dark. And if I click on the light one, you will see the same dashboard, but just in a light mode. If I want to navigate to the other one, I can just click on the dark button and the other page will be shown. So I actually used the same tricks that I did before, which means I just copy pasted the whole dashboard, changed the formatting to dark or to light ones. Then I formatted the buttons differently. Then I made sure that these buttons are linked to the other pages. And in the last step, you can get rid of the worksheets again. And with just one click, you can easily change the dashboard setting. And now you have the illusion of having a dark mode in Excel, which is actually just another page. But if the users don't know it, you can really just show something very cool and they will be blown away of this trick, I think, because I do think that this is really awesome. And the best part is it's very simple. You just have to know a few tips or tricks, and then you can create a really amazing dashboard. Yeah, so that was actually my last example. I was looking at the time, so I think we're good in time.
You're all good, Lara. All right. You can breathe a sigh of relief. That was a heavy sigh at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, before we start our opening to any questions and that kind of shenanigans, let me take this opportunity just to say thank you and say that your presentation was excellent.
Thank you.
As making the color schemes of my stuff look pretty poor.
Very, very nice. Well done, Lara.
Thank you.
You're very well prepared and organized, like the data sets you have and stuff. So it was interesting. Carlos is not with us anymore, but I know he appreciated it. He had to shoot off about 5 minutes ago. But yeah, I think this is not necessarily kind of my world in the kind of presentation side of things. So it's always interesting to see stuff that gets put together. And more, I guess, in the queries and the formula kind of side rather than the presentation side. And I think for one of the takeaways from myself, it's all about just bringing these tools together, isn't it? A bit of imagination, a bit of creativity, and a lot of these tools people might be familiar with, maybe things like hiding sheet tabs and stuff less so, but a lot of the other tools are things like your XLOOKUP and your shapes and charts are things that people are familiar with, but combining them into like an application is a different story. Yeah, and then that's the takeaway from me, the skills. I don't know if you can see the chat window, Lara, but there's lots of kind of comments and things flying.
Yeah, I will take a look. Let me just stop the screen sharing. Yeah, and that's actually what I learned throughout the years that I have been using Excel. Everything is possible if you have, as you mentioned, a little bit of creativity, and then you try to look for solutions. So if you know a few things, you can combine them, then you're already an expert, I guess.
Taylor's just pops a link to Lara's files back in the chat window, and this will all be sent with a recording. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put it in the description. Well, they're in the chat window of YouTube, but it'll be in the description as well if you're watching a replay. There's links in those workbooks, obviously, for everything's Lara's done, but links to connect with Lara on LinkedIn and stuff's in there as well. So if you're eager to do that, it's all in the files that have been provided. Just looking through the chat to see if there's any questions or anything.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat right now. If you have some questions, this is the time. I'm happy to answer.
There is a question from Jess in there about any documentation that can be shared with the steps.
Actually, not really. I shared the whole Excel, so every dashboard that you see, I shared it with you. But if you have some questions, that just let me know, and I'm happy to provide you with some explanations when you want to go a little bit deeper into the details.
Sure. And there's a link in those files to sign up for Laura's newsletter. And so is your
I was thinking actually of sharing that just in the chat, so
your newsletter, Laura, is that in English as well, or just German?
Yes, it's in English. Yes.
Cool.
If someone is German speaking, I can provide you with the German link. But yeah, it's generally in English. Yes.
Gotcha. Let me just copy something from YouTube, Laura, into the chat. Where's my Zoom chat gone? Here it is. So somebody's just asking if you create this stuff for clients, I guess, do you provide documentation, I guess, like helper sheets, and I'm assuming that's what the question's about. If when you hand something over, like, do they know how to use it?
Yeah, well, I try to focus on making the dashboard really easy to use. So whenever I have data, I'm trying to hide it so that they actually kind of change the data, because I have made the experience that many times the users mixing the users with the data is not the best solution. So I'm trying to hide the data and protecting the worksheet so that they can only use more or less the slicers to see what the dashboard shows them. For advanced users, I'm using best practices, so data tables and so that it's also easy functions, so that if they want to change something, then it's easy to see what to change and how to change. Like, I know that there are like a lot of people, and I know Alan is really good with Lambda. With client projects, I'm not using a lot of Lambdas because they don't know that, unfortunately. So I'm sticking to more easy functions. I think Lambda is more for fun. Yeah, more or less. But it all depends on the clients, there are really advanced and there are basics. So it depends on the context and the situation.
Sure. It's a bit unrelated to this, but there's a question about generative AI, and I don't know if you're interested in answering that.
Yeah. Now I see it. Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Just recently, it's a little bit off topic, but Bitcoin has a new all-time high. And I think Excel is similar to that, because a lot of people always say Bitcoin or Excel will die in the next 2 years, and then it's still there. So I do think that Excel has a future. It might be different from what we are now because it's faster and everything. I do use some AI with Excel together, but I think AI is so new that it's not good enough as it is right now, because you still need to understand what's going on behind. And if your data is not structured, then AI won't be able to help you. So you still need to understand this. Whatever I do with AI, because I use it daily, I need to make sure that it actually makes sense. So it's a great helper, but you still need to have a human just to help out with the questions. I don't think AI can do everything. We'll see.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think kind of thanks, Grania. Like now more than ever, it's just when I'm doing my training sessions, it may not be the most exciting part, but I'm always focusing on the fundamentals.
Yeah.
About utilizing structures like tables and ranges and all this kind of stuff, understanding like boring topics like data types and how
Yeah.
Excel behaves. Because anybody can look up steps on how to do something, but what those Instagram like videos and other stuff don't show is they don't tell you the boring stuff.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
stuff that doesn't get the clicks, but is the important stuff. You follow these steps, and but you don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah, and actually that's a shame because as an example, you see the flash field on Instagram all over time, but they don't tell you when not to use it or what happens if the data doesn't make any sense, And I think that's a shame because that's what you will see in your daily job. Maybe it won't work every time, and then you need to have another solution. You need to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Lots more comments flying in there.
I see a question with Excel Online too, and is there some differences? It's a great question because just in my last project, I had to use Excel Online. I think there are huge differences. Like I have to say, when I have to use Excel Online, I'm a little bit lost because the user experience is just not the same. The context menus are on different places. I'm a little bit lost. So I think it's a good first start, but there's no way that I will use Excel Online if I have the chance to use Excel desktop. For me, it's much easier. I'm used to it and it can do much more. So for me, Excel Online is a little bit similar to Google Sheets. In some way, the design might look better. I think for beginners also, it might be easier to do some conditional formatting. But if you really want to go deeper into the topic to be more advanced, then absolutely Excel desktop is the way. Oh, spark lines in dashboard, another question. Maybe I can show you an example very quickly because I actually prepared also sparkline example, but then I didn't show it.
So I think like Stephen said in the presentation, I think you used, if I remember rightly, you showed a bar chart, didn't you? And then did you have like an area chart as well at some point?
Maybe, I don't know. Can you see
my
my
Not at the moment, no.
Not at the moment. Okay, let me see. Maybe I misclicked.
Oh, here we come.
Okay. So there I have actually also the reindeer topic again. And here I have the sparkline. Now I did this dashboard with VBA, so that's what I didn't want to show you as an example. But in this case, I used sparklines. I don't use the camera tool because I think it doesn't have a good, great resolution. So if you want to make the camera tool a little bit bigger, it won't work that much. And I also like to give the users the option that they can actually click on the cell, and copy some numbers or so, and you cannot do that with the camera tool. I didn't use here the background. So what I did here is I just made sure that all of the other charts have some background, but actually I just used the cells, put the sparklines in the dashboards, and that's it. So if you don't use this background rectangle that I've shown you, then I think the easiest way is that you just show the data in the cell with the sparklines, and then you format the background to white instead of gray, and then it's also have, like in this way, this also has this dashboard feeling. Or you do the other trick that you just cut out the part from the rectangle here that you want to show, and then you can use also a nice background.
And I assume, Laura, you've used a VBA for the interaction, when you click a reindeer name and it highlights, that's the VBA side, is it?
Yeah, this one that I click on it, this is VBA, yes. Yes.
I did that on a dashboard a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it because I think it's so nice looking. Yeah.
If you didn't see my dashboard, it's much more boring, but I've used that in the past.
Yeah, I have to say, I also don't use this one with client projects. It's more for me, for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me see if there are any more questions, maybe.
So after all this analysis, Lara, who is the best reindeer?
Oh, it's a good question.
Who delivered the
I
most
like
presents?
Frosty because it's blue. So yeah, but that's, yeah.
Yes, it will be Ramesh, yeah.
I will share the link once again for the recording. Just a second.
Cheers, Carmen. And everybody else who might be leaving. Cool.
Yeah, and again, if you have any questions in the future, because I didn't go really into details, just text me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any future questions related to the session.
Just open your LinkedIn again.
Thank you, Ellen.
Right, I think I'll probably be closing down this YouTube.
Yeah, no more questions. We can close that.
Thank you, and everyone for being there and for the comments. It's great to see that you enjoyed the session. I'm really happy to have read that.
Yeah, it was really, really great, Laura.
Thank you.
Very quick.
Sorry, I'm just going to close down the YouTube stream, just letting everybody on there know. See you later, everybody on YouTube. Ooh, okay, that's done. It's just us on Zoom now.